Yesterday, we were looking at the fact that if you're doing anything for Jesus, you can expect opposition. You can expect problems to come. And Paul certainly experienced that. We're in Acts, and we're looking at chapter 14, began in chapter 8, and looked at Philip, and then went to chapter 13, where we look at Paul in more detail than just a little glimpse we get in the center section of Acts. We're looking at a period of quite a few years here. We're looking at a time of about 14 years, and Paul's first missionary journey is where we are. And as we look at this particular episode of Paul receiving opposition, the opposition that he received was nothing like what we might experience today, at least not yet. But Jews came from Antioch and Iconium. Having won over the crowds, they stoned Paul and dragged him out of the city, supposing him to be dead. But while the disciples stood around him, he got up and entered the city. The next day he went away with Barnabas to Derbe. Well, Paul didn't just run after he was stoned and they thought to death. He entered back into the city and made sure everybody knew that God was greater than anything that they knew about. And it then continues in chapter 14, verse 21. And after they had preached the gospel to that city and made many disciples, they returned to Lystra, to Iconium, and to Antioch, strengthening the souls of disciples, encouraging them to continue in the faith, and saying, through many tribulations, we must enter the kingdom of God. Then they appointed elders for them in every church. Having prayed with fasting, they commended them to the Lord, in whom they had believed. There's some very interesting principles here. One is that Paul knows that the spreading of the gospel is going to always be difficult, and it is. However, nothing like the opposition that he received do we receive today, at least in America. We do, certainly in some other countries. But we also need to look at the principles here that there is a follow-up that needs to be done with disciples. It's not just winning them. You remember the Great Commission says, teaching them all that I've commanded you. And so we recognize that it's not just winning souls. It's also discipling them and strengthening them in their faith. One of the things that I always admired about the Billy Graham organization was when they came into a city, they mobilized the churches so that after the revival, after many decisions have been made with the Billy Graham Crusade, that there would be individual follow-up with every person that made a decision, and that they would be strengthened by the local churches, and that they would have a place to continue to worship in the local community. And then I also want you to notice that they appointed elders. And I truly believe that elders are separate from deacons. When we looked at deacons in the early chapters of Acts, they were to serve tables. They were to minister to people. Elders were there for the spiritual guidance that people needed. And so we find that after they established these churches and strengthened the disciples, they wanted to be sure that that work would continue. And so they appointed, not elected out of popularity, as so many churches elect deacons and elders out of popularity. They were appointed. Their character was known. They had a reputation that could be trusted, and they were appointed. And they were there to be sure that the work would continue in each of the communities where Paul had established churches. It's a wonderful thing when you see the church functioning as it should and being led by spiritual people and not just by popularity contests of election, and to see the church functioning as it should, strengthening the disciples so that they could withstand the temptations and the trials that obviously comes into all of our lives. And that's my thought for the day. God bless you and have a great day.